Story 1. I want to learn German because I plan to move to a German-speaking country. However, I'm also considering Spanish since my family is Puerto Rican. Story 2. Mandarin, Spanish, or Hindi would be the most useful. I believe Mandarin is the most challenging for a native English speaker to learn, so I would choose that language. Story 3. For general interest. I am completely obsessed with words in Japanese. For practical use, Mandarin is the best option. Story 4. I quite like K-pop, and most of the time I have no idea what they're saying. I'm just going off vibes. Story 5. Spanish would make the most sense for my location, but to be able to gossip about people in public, I need a language not spoken by a billion people. So Dothraki it is. Story 6. I'm torn. Either Danish to make it easier to move to Denmark as I want to, or Spanish because it would be very useful in my daily life at work. Story 7. Mandarin. I feel that knowing both English and Mandarin would build neural pathways that make it easier to learn any other language I desire, since they are so different from each other. Additionally, many people speak Mandarin, which adds a practical element. Story 8. Greek. I love the country and its unique inhabitants. I hope to move there someday, but I need to learn to communicate with them in their own language. Story 9. I took 2 night classes in my community to learn Spanish. I struggled in the first class, so I signed up for another one. I doubt I'll ever master it. Story 10. Minoan, or whatever they would have called it, refers to late Bronze Age Crete. I would be able to explain the contents of the linear A tablets. Story 11. French has always eluded me. I'm fluent in Italian, passable in Spanish, and was once proficient in German. But French has always seemed impossible, and I need a magic wand. Story 12. Japanese and German. I enjoy watching anime and some Japanese YouTubers, so it would be nice to watch without subtitles. I like German because it sounds cool. I enjoyed learning it for a while on Duolingo before my holiday in December 2023, but I didn't keep it up. I need to start again. Story 13. Hmong. I swear I have tried hard to learn. I know many of the words, but I cannot pronounce them correctly. It's so bad that the sound of my attempts even offends me. I have to overpronounce to try to get the correct inflection, but it just makes me sound horrible. It doesn't help that there are 3 different words. I will use arrows for inflection. GGG, the last one has a downward inflection. Story 14. If you want a job translating, the army is looking for fluent speakers of Russian, Mandarin, Farsi, and Arabic. Americans go to war to teach their children geography. Mark Twain. Story 15. Japanese is definitely a fascinating language. Katakana and hiragana are easy to learn, but kanji is the most important and it is quite complex to master. Story 16. Etruscan is fascinating because, 1. It would be exciting to speak an ancient language that is largely unknown. My understanding of the language would contribute to research, as it is undeciphered and has a minimal vocabulary. It is a pre-Indo-European language, similar to Basque, but from a different root, meaning it lacks a closely related sister language. Story 17. If we are discussing a native speaker level of fluency, I prefer German. I hold dual citizenship and will be relocating there in a few years. I am fluent, but it remains a mental challenge to speak exclusively in German. Otherwise, I would choose Bahasa or Czech, as I plan to spend significant time in Indonesia and Czechia during my retirement. I would likely lean towards Czech because it is more challenging to learn than Bahasa and provides access to many other Slavic languages, similar to how German connects with Dutch, Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian. Story 18. Minoan. Imagine being the only person able to read texts in a language that the rest of the world cannot comprehend. Story 19. Spanish. Definitely. I know many of my coworkers speak Spanish, and I wish I could communicate with them. My boyfriend's family speaks Spanish as well, so I could impress them too. Story 20. I work in the construction industry in Texas. It would be immensely helpful to speak Spanish. I know a bit, but need to become fluent. Story 21. Arabic, Chinese, or Hindi are options to consider. Spanish would also be a good choice as it is easier to learn, and I already know some beginner phrases while I do not have any knowledge of the other languages. Story 22, Vulcan. I'm not a Trek fan. I just like the idea of telling people that I could have chosen any language and I chose Vulcan. All of this just to watch them go from questioning and confused to incredulous, and then to uncontrollable waves of frustrated anger at the absurd waste of my juvenile foolishness. Story 23, Russian. From what I understand, the language is poetic. Anyone who speaks two languages knows the power of words. Certain emotions can only be felt when you have the right words for them, and not all languages have words for all emotions. From what I understand, in Russian you can feel a broad spectrum of pain and joy. Story 24. I have already invested too much time in learning Spanish. It would feel like a waste to abandon that. However, for Italian speakers, it is very easy to learn, so I would essentially acquire two languages for the price of one. Story 25. I would learn the language of nonsense because it seems most companies value employees the most who are fluent in it. Story 26. I would probably choose Spanish. It is spoken around the world, and I feel it would be great to chat with people in many different countries. Additionally, it sounds very smooth. Story 27. I would choose Swahili. It is a language spoken by millions across East Africa and has significant cultural and historical importance that many people do not recognize. Swahili has influences from Arabic, Portuguese, and some Indian languages, creating an incredible mix of cultures and histories. I find it fascinating how Swahili serves as a bridge for communication across different countries and ethnic groups in the region. Speaking it would allow me to connect with people from places like Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, and would also enable me to engage with vibrant stories, music, and traditions that are often overlooked in global discussions. Additionally, it is a poetic-sounding language, like music when spoken, and I cannot imagine how incredible it would be to experience it fluently, whether in everyday conversations or in its rich oral storytelling traditions. It is definitely not one of the first languages people usually consider, which is exactly why I believe it would be so rewarding to learn. Story 28. I would choose an ancient language for its historical value. Being able to speak ancient Hebrew, ancient Greek, or Old English, as they were once spoken, would be beneficial for historians, linguists, and scholars. Story 29. I can speak Spanish pretty well. If I didn't, though, that would be my choice because it would be the most useful. So I'll go with Arabic. I really enjoy listening to Middle Eastern music, especially the classic songs from artists like Kulthum. Even without knowing the words, the music itself resonates on a different level. I would love to experience the music while also understanding the words' meaning without losing them in translation. Story 30. Mandarin is a challenging version of Chinese. While the root languages of English are German, many English words are derived from Latin roots, and this influence is particularly noticeable in academic, scientific, and legal terminology. English is generally considered easier to learn than Mandarin. Mandarin is especially difficult for English speakers to learn due to several factors. Firstly, the writing system is extremely challenging for those accustomed to the Latin alphabet, as it requires memorizing thousands of unique characters. Mandarin has 4 tones, which can change the meaning of a word depending on how it is pronounced. For example, the word ma can mean mother, horse, rough, or scold, based on its tone. Pronunciation can also be difficult because certain sounds in Mandarin may not exist in English, making accurate pronunciation challenging. The lack of phonetic consistency between characters and their pinyin can add to the complexity. Why is Chinese a useful language to be fluent in today? Story 31. There's a YouTuber I started following during the lockdown who creates videos about her 10 cats. I'm not in a position to have a cat right now, so I live vicariously through her. Recently, she switched from live streams to pre-recorded videos with subtitles, which is frustrating because the live streams do not have subtitles. I can no longer understand what's going on. Additionally, if I had the miraculous ability to speak another language fluently without learning it, I would choose to master a particularly difficult language. Story 32. My wife is from Thailand, and her English is great. However, I want to communicate with her in her own language. Story 33. Body language is challenging for me as I struggle with social cues and tone. Cassandra Cain became a greater fighter than Batman because of this. Story 34. Arabic and Japanese are two of the most poetic languages. I also want to be able to order my shawarma in the native language of my shawarma vendor. Story 35. The four owners of my restaurant are Greek, and two of the cooks are Greek. Sometimes they speak to each other in Greek, and it would be fun to join in to tease them. However, for practicality, I prefer Spanish. Story 36. My instinct was to say Portuguese because my girlfriend is Brazilian. However, upon further reflection, I would prefer to learn it the traditional way. It wouldn't feel earned to simply have it. I will choose Gaelic instead. Story 37. Hebrew is important for reading the Bible in its original language, visiting Israel, and conversing with the local people. Story 38. Japanese. But it's a tough decision. I would dislike working for a Japanese company, but if I could be based there, I would have the time of my life. Story 39. I work with many Spanish-speaking people, but I am too lazy to learn anything new. Story 40. If it involves reading and writing, it is Japanese. I know that realistically, Spanish or Chinese would make a significant impact on a global scale, but I don't live on a global scale. I am limited by my lack of knowledge of Japanese, which affects my access to hobbies like Japanese role-playing games, manga, and anime. Spanish is relatively easy to learn, so if I ever need it, learning in the traditional way is not a major concern. However, every attempt at learning Japanese has failed when it came to writing, as I struggle to grasp the concept of using symbols that represent words instead of simply stringing letters together. Story 41. French is my first choice because I want to live there. My second choice would be Spanish due to the large number of speakers in the Northern Hemisphere. Story 42. If we are sticking to human spoken languages, the most universal choice would probably be Mandarin. The most enjoyable for me would be Japanese, but I would choose the most logical option, which is Norwegian, and I would likely move there. Story 43. I am from the United States but moved to the Netherlands. I am trying to learn Dutch, but it is a struggle. I wish I could learn Dutch instantly. My American tongue just does not roll that way. Story 44. Korean allows me to watch K-dramas without subtitles and helps me understand what they're saying without losing anything in translation. Story 45. I could watch much more content without subtitles, as sometimes they are not available. Being able to communicate with the locals would be wonderful. Story 46. I would choose the language of technical support so I could finally understand what they really mean by, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" Story 47. Nigerian, so I could speak in my husband's language and communicate when we attended parties with mostly Nigerian people. Story 48. Scottish Gaelic. I have been teaching myself on and off since around 2022. It is a fantastic, beautiful oral language to learn, but the writing is the hardest part, in my opinion. Story 49. I am with my 84-year-old mother, and we cannot leave Costa Rica until she recovers enough to travel. She had a bad fall that required major surgery. The hospital and staff are amazing. The language barrier can be difficult sometimes. However, I realize I am in their country. Story 50. I chose Scottish Gaelic. I have been learning for almost 3 years, and I would love to truly master it. I enjoy a challenge, so I will continue to work hard. Story 51. Spanish and Arabic, as well as Armenian because it is a dying language and I want to be among the last speakers. Story 52. I have been trying to learn Spanish for years, but I consistently fail to use it enough to move beyond basic understanding, especially if I am spoken to as if I were a child. Story 53. I was born in the United States to Filipino parents, and I can understand when my family asks me a question or engages in a random conversation. However, I always respond to them in English instead of Tagalog. I would like to be able to speak Tagalog instantly and fluently. Story 54. Czech. Everything else I have tried has seemed within the realm of possibility, at least, but all the diacritical marks and declensions made me despair. I am not good at it. Story 55. My choice as well. I am Canadian, And although French is one of our two official languages, English is the other. I was never conversant in French. Story 56. French is challenging because I want to speak it, but it's quite difficult. I would be fine learning Japanese the hard way. I studied it a bit years ago and found it enjoyable. However, French is still hard for me. Story 57. I am learning Spanish at the moment, and learning a new language takes time. I would prefer to speed up my next one. Story 58. Mandarin. I can speak English fluently and Spanish functionally. I can sort of dissect most Latin-based languages, but I'm not a polyglot. So, Mandarin or Arabic. My best friend's child is studying Arabic in Scotland at one of the best language schools in the world. I am going to guess she will be successful, as she is academically talented. Story 59. Greek, Spanish, and Italian are easy languages to learn, in my opinion, as they share many Latin roots and have numerous words similar to English. I recommend exploring playlists on Spotify. I particularly enjoy the ones by Paul Noble. Story 60. I love Japanese culture, and it would be great to speak the language fluently. This way, I won't have to wait for English subtitles to watch anime. I can enjoy it without any delays. Story 61. Japanese. I have been self-learning for 7 months, and it has been challenging. I know it will take me a few years, but I am determined. Story 62. I want to learn Lithuanian to speak with my partner's family. There are very few courses, videos, and materials available compared to more popular languages, so it is somewhat of a hassle. Story 63. I would choose Mandarin, as I would appear very unsuspecting as a Caucasian person. Then, suddenly, I would be fluent in Mandarin, which would be quite unexpected. It's great for the office and also for socializing at the pub. Story 64. French. I love it, but it's a huge challenge to learn, and I find it really difficult. I have studied Spanish to a relative level of fluency, and I truly enjoy that process. I wouldn't mind becoming magically fluent in Spanish because I have fun with it. However, for French, I would prefer to finish it quickly. Story 65. Spanish, absolutely. I would choose the Spanish spoken in Central and South America and the Caribbean, as opposed to the Spanish spoken in Spain. I spend more time in Latin America than in Europe. Story 66. Spanish is my preferred language for verbal communication, but I plan to learn American Sign Language, and if given the option, I would choose it immediately. Story 67. Hebrew is written from right to left, and its different alphabet and non-Indo-European roots make it challenging for me to read and understand. Story 68. I am going to receive a cookbook for Russian cuisine from the library today, and I will be able to keep it longer once it arrives physically. I can't wait to make Russian breakfast foods for myself. Story 69. There is a really sweet girl who works at the library and seems like she needs a good conversation. Story 70. I would choose Spanish. I took 4 years of high school German with a semester at university but have never visited a German-speaking country. The top-selling beer in the United States is Modelo Especial, which indicates something about the demographics. Spanish would be extremely useful here in the States. I don't regret learning German, but I would really like to know Spanish. Story 71. I would choose to learn a language that has a rich heritage like Spanish or Mandarin. I think they open up many opportunities for interaction and understanding of different cultures. Story 72. Spanish for sure. I'm already fluent in English and German. Spanish is incredibly widespread, and I believe it might open the door for more Romance languages. I think Italian and Portuguese could come easily from there, and maybe even French. Story 73. Danish. Oh yes, I can finally watch all the seasons of Bonderoven, the Danish farming show. They have 1 million episodes on their TV channel's website, but there are no English subtitles. Watching Danish without subtitles makes it difficult to understand what they are saying. Story 74. I am already quite proficient in native Spanish to the point that I married a woman who didn't speak English. I was shocked at how much it improved my life. I believe learning Chinese would have the same effect. Story 75. Working in retail, trying to communicate with someone whose first language is Spanish can be challenging, and often leads to awkward situations. I have coworkers who do not speak any English. Story 76. Any language from India. I've started learning Hindi at my customer's request, and it's difficult. Story 77. I am learning Spanish, so I would choose something I have no confidence in being able to learn. Probably an Asian language, though I am unsure which one. Story 78. English, because I still can't grasp the grammar and the many exceptions in pronunciation correctly. The gap between my writing and speaking is unreal. Story 79. Chinese translation offers excellent financial opportunities in my area, along with a great chance of meeting an attractive Asian woman. Story 80. My grandparents spoke Teochew, a Chinese dialect. However, they spoke Chinese to us youngsters because that is what we learned in school. I was very close to them and would definitely choose Teochew, even though they are not around anymore. Story 81. Spanish is my wife's first language, and despite being married for 14 years, my Spanish is very poor. It would greatly help me to speak it fluently. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.